My fiance's family ambushed me with a secret prenup 30 minutes before I was supposed to walk down the aisle, demanding I sign away my inheritance and business in front of 200 wedding guests. When I refused, they tried to humiliate me by announcing to everyone that I was too greedy to commit. What they didn't expect was for me to grab the microphone and tell our guests exactly what was in that prenup and why there wouldn't be a wedding today. Let us know in the comments where you're watching. If this resonated, don't miss out on subscribing because tomorrow I'm sharing something that will completely change how you think about this topic. Let me take you back to how this nightmare began and how I turned their moment of triumph into the most embarrassing day of their entitled lives. I'm Riley Thompson, 28, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I was about to marry the love of my life. I'm a pediatric nurse at Riverside Children's Hospital in Millbrook Heights, and I also run a small but successful online therapy practice for parents dealing with childhood chronic illnesses. Nothing glamorous, but it's work that matters to me, and it pays well enough that I'd saved $85,000 for our wedding and honeymoon. My fiancé was Cameron Ashworth, 31, a financial advisor whose family owns half the commercial real estate in our upscale suburb of Willowbrook. The Ashworths weren't just wealthy, they were old money wealthy, the kind of family where great-grandmother's portrait hangs in the country club and everyone knows their name. Cameron's mother, Constance Ashworth, served on every charity board that mattered, and his father, Richard, had been mayor twice. When Cameron first brought me home to meet them 18 months ago, I felt like Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman, except I was already successful in my own right. Still, the family estate in Willowbrook's historic district was intimidating. 12 bedrooms, a circular driveway, and oil paintings worth more than my annual salary. But Cameron seemed different from his family. Down to earth. He drove a modest sedan instead of the BMW his parents gifted him. He chose our neighborhood coffee shop, Grind and Brew, over the country club for our dates. My family can be intense, he'd warned me early on. But don't let them intimidate you. You're exactly what I need. Someone real. Someone who chose their career because they wanted to help people, not because daddy handed them a trust fund. I loved him for that, for seeing me as an equal despite the obvious wealth gap. When he proposed last Christmas in the same coffee shop where we'd had our first date, I actually cried. The ring was beautiful, but not ostentatious. A classic solitaire that felt like me, not like what the Ashworth family would have chosen. We planned the wedding together. Well, mostly together. Constance had opinions, strong ones, about the venue. The Riverside Country Club is where proper families celebrate. The flowers, peonies are so much more elegant than roses, don't you think? And especially the guest list. We simply must invite the Weatherbees. Richard does business with them. But I held my ground on the things that mattered. We were getting married at Evergreen Manor, a beautiful historic estate that was elegant but not pretentious. My maid of honor would be my best friend since nursing school, Jenna Martinez, not to Cameron's sister, as Constance had suggested, and we were serving a mix of both our favorite foods, not just the refined menu Constance preferred. The morning of our wedding, 3 weeks ago, I woke up in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, feeling nervous but excited. My mom, Linda, was already bustling around making coffee and organizing the flowers. My dad, Robert, was unusually quiet. He'd never quite felt comfortable with the Ashworths family's wealth, but he adored Cameron. "You're sure about this, kiddo?" Dad asked while Mom was in the shower. "It's not too late to change your mind." I laughed. "Dad, I'm marrying Cameron, not his family. And besides, today's about us, not them." How wrong I was. The morning flew by in a blur of hair, makeup, and champagne with my bridesmaids. Jenna kept making jokes to calm my nerves, and my sister Amy was documenting everything on her phone. By 2 p.m., I was in my dress, a stunning A-line gown with delicate lace sleeves that had belonged to my grandmother, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. at Evergreen Manor's Garden Pavilion. Cocktail hour would follow, then dinner and dancing until midnight. We'd hired Melody Strings Quartet for the ceremony and the Riverside Band for the reception. Everything was perfect. Everything was ready. At 3:15 p.m., 15 minutes before the photographer wanted to start pre-ceremony photos, there was a sharp knock on my bridal suite door. "Riley, dear?" Constance's voice carried through the door with that particular tone she used when she was about to ask for something she expected me to comply with immediately. Jenna shot me a look. Want me to tell her you're busy? No, it's fine, I said, smoothing my dress. Probably just wants to give me some family heirloom or tradition speech. I opened the door to find not just Constance, but Richard Ashworth and a man I'd never seen before in an expensive suit carrying a leather briefcase. Behind them stood Cameron, looking pale and avoiding my eyes.
Riley, this is Harrison Webb, our family attorney, Constance said, brushing past me into the room like she owned it. We have a small document that needs your signature before the ceremony begins. Just a formality, really, but the family has certain protections that need to be in place. My stomach dropped. What kind of document? Harrison Webb opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick stack of papers. It's a prenuptial agreement, Miss Thompson. Standard procedure for families of the Ashworths standing. A prenup? My voice came out higher than I intended. Cameron, we never discussed a prenup. He finally looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Guilt mixed with resignation. Riley, I know this seems sudden, but my family insisted. It's how things are done. 30 minutes before our wedding. I stared at him, then at his parents, then at the lawyer who was calmly laying papers across the vanity where my makeup was spread. You're giving me a prenup 30 minutes before I'm supposed to walk down the aisle? Which is why we need to handle this quickly. Richard spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the same authority he'd used as mayor. The guests are already arriving, and we can't delay the ceremony. That's when I realized this wasn't some last-minute panic or oversight. This was calculated. This was a power play designed to corner me when I'd have no choice but to sign. But they had no idea who they were dealing with, because while they saw a small-town nurse who should feel grateful to marry into their family, what they missed was that I'd spent 2 years watching them operate. I learned their tactics, their pressure points, and most importantly, their greatest weakness, their obsession with appearances and social standing. They wanted to humiliate me into compliance. Instead, they were about to get a masterclass in exactly how much damage a woman with nothing left to lose could do to their precious reputation. If you're loving what you're hearing, smash that subscribe button. It really keeps us going. All right, let's jump back in. I stared at the papers Harrison Webb had spread across my vanity, like he was dealing cards in some twisted game. The prenuptial agreement was 37 pages of legal jargon, but even a quick scan revealed terms so one-sided they took my breath away. Let me understand this correctly, I said, my voice surprisingly steady as I picked up the first page. You want me to sign this 30 minutes before our wedding, in my wedding dress, with 200 guests waiting outside. Riley, darling, it's really quite standard. Just some basic protections for the family assets. Basic protections. Right. I started reading aloud, my voice getting louder with each clause. The party of the second part, that's me apparently, waives all rights to any Ashworth family assets, including but not limited to real estate holdings, investment portfolios, business interests, and future inheritance distributions. Cameron shifted uncomfortably. Riley, maybe we should just... Oh, but wait, there's more. I flipped to page 12. Any assets brought into the marriage by the party of the second part, including savings, business ownership, and professional income, shall be considered joint marital property subject to equitable distribution. The room went dead silent except for the sound of guests chatting and laughing outside. Jenna had been standing frozen by the door, but now she stepped forward. I'm sorry, did I hear that right? Riley's assets become joint property, but the Ashworth assets remain separate? That's not a prenup, that's robbery. Harrison Webb cleared his throat. Miss Martinez, these arrangements are quite common in families of substantial what? Entitlement? Jenna shot back. But I kept reading, because it got worse. So much worse. Oh, this is my favorite part, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. If the marriage ends in divorce, the party of the second part agrees to waive all rights to spousal support and will relocate outside of Millbrook County within 60 days. Relocate? I looked up at Cameron. You want me to sign a document saying that if we divorce, I not only get nothing, but I have to leave my job, my patients, my family, and move away like some kind of exile? Riley, please. Cameron finally found his voice. It's insurance. My family has built something over generations, and I'm what exactly? A gold digger? A threat to the family fortune? My voice was rising, and I didn't care. Cameron, I make $78,000 a year as a nurse and another $45,000 from my therapy practice. I paid for the entire honeymoon to Italy with my own money. I've never asked your family for a single dollar. Richard Ashworth spoke up, his mayoral authority voice in full effect. Miss Thompson, this isn't about your character. It's about protecting what took 3 generations to build. By stealing what I've built? I laughed, but there was no humor in it, because that's what this is. Look at Clause 15. I found the page, my hands actually shaking now. Any business developed or expanded during the marriage becomes joint marital property. I looked directly at Constance. My therapy practice that I started before I even met Cameron becomes yours if we divorce, but your family's real estate empire stays locked away? Well, yes, but—
And Clause 22, I interrupted, turning pages frantically. The party of the second part agrees to prioritize family obligations and social commitments as determined by the Ashworth family matriarch. I stared at Constance. You literally want me to sign a document making you my boss? Harrison Webb stepped forward with his briefcase. Miss Thompson, I understand this seems overwhelming, but these protections— Get out. I beg your pardon? I said get out. All of you, except Cameron. I pointed toward the door. Get out. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Richard's face turned red. Young lady, I don't think you understand the position you're in. No, I don't think you understand the position you're in, I shot back. You just handed me a document that would make me an indentured servant to your family while stripping away everything I've worked for. And you did it 30 minutes before my wedding in front of witnesses, thinking I'd be too embarrassed to say no? Constance's composure finally cracked. Riley, if you can't see that this is for the good of everyone, everyone— Everyone? I was shouting now, and I could see guests through the window turning toward the bridal suite. This benefits exactly 3 people. You, your husband, and your son, who apparently doesn't have the spine to stand up to his mommy. That hit Cameron like a physical blow. He flinched and stepped toward me. Riley, please, can we just what, Cameron? Can we just pretend this is normal? Can we just ignore that your family waited until the absolute last minute to ambush me with this because they knew it was so unreasonable that I never agreed to it if I had time to think? Harrison Webb was gathering up his papers. Perhaps we should postpone the ceremony until— Oh, no, I said, my voice suddenly calm again. No. We're not postponing anything. You want an answer? Here's your answer. I picked up the prenup, all 37 pages, and held it up so everyone could see it clearly. Then I tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper seemed to echo in the small room. Constance gasped like I'd slapped her. Riley! Cameron lunged forward. What are you doing? I'm making a decision, I said, tearing the halves into quarters. The same decision any self-respecting woman would make when presented with a document that treats her like property. I let the pieces fall to the floor like confetti. So, here's what's going to happen, I continued, my voice steady and clear. You're going to leave my bridal suite. You're going to go tell your 200 guests why there's going to be a delay, and you're going to explain to them exactly what was in that prenup and why I refused to sign it. Richard stepped forward, his face purple now. You have no idea what you're doing, young lady. No idea at all. Actually, I have a perfect idea what I'm doing, I replied, smoothing my grandmother's wedding dress. I'm about to save myself from the biggest mistake of my life. I looked at Cameron, who was staring at the torn papers on the floor like they were pieces of our relationship. "The question is," I said softly, "what are you going to do?" Because this was his moment, his choice. Stand with the woman he claimed to love, or side with the family that had just tried to humiliate and manipulate that woman into legal servitude. I already knew which way this was going to go, but I needed him to say it. Cameron stared at the torn papers for what felt like an eternity. When he finally looked up at me, I saw something die in his eyes, and it wasn't love for me. It was his last shred of independence. "Riley, maybe we should just postpone. Give everyone time to cool down, renegotiate the terms." Renegotiate? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Cameron, did you hear what I just read? Your family wants me to sign away my business, my assets, my right to live in my own hometown if things don't work out. What exactly would you like to renegotiate? The part where I become your family's property, or the part where I get banished like some medieval peasant?" Constance stepped forward, her composure returning now that her son was wavering. "Riley, dear, you're being dramatic. These are standard protective measures." "Standard? For whom?" I shot back. "Show me one other prenup that requires the bride to relocate if the marriage fails. Show me one other agreement that makes the wife's business joint property while keeping the husband's family assets separate." Harrison Webb cleared his throat. "Ms. Thompson, perhaps if we adjusted some of the language—" "There is no adjusting this," I said firmly. "This document wasn't written in good faith. It was written to trap me." That's when Cameron made his choice. Instead of defending me, instead of standing up to his family, he looked at me with what I can only describe as disappointment. "Riley, my family has always been generous to the people I've been dating. They welcomed you, included you in everything." "Included me?" I laughed bitterly. "Cameron, your mother has corrected my grammar at dinner parties. Your father once asked me if I understood how to properly address a senator. They've been tolerating me, not including me." Richard's patience finally snapped. "Miss Thompson, I think it's time you understood exactly who you're dealing with. The Ashworth name opens doors in this community. Cameron's future depends on maintaining certain standards, certain associations." The threat was subtle but clear. Marry into the family on their terms or face social and professional consequences. "Are you threatening me?" I asked. "I'm explaining reality," Richard replied coldly. "Millbrook County is a small community. Riverside Children's Hospital depends on charitable donations for many of its programs. The Ashworth Foundation is a major contributor." My blood ran cold. He was threatening my job, my patients, my life's work. "Dad," Cameron said weakly, That's not what?" Richard turned to his son. "Not true? The foundation donated $150,000 to the pediatric wing last year alone. Dr. Patterson speaks very highly of our family's commitment to the hospital." Dr. Patterson was my supervisor. The message was crystal clear. Sign the prenup or watch your career crumble. But if they thought that would break me, they were about to learn how wrong they were. "Jenna," I said calmly, never taking my eyes off Richard, "would you please go find my father? Tell him I need to speak with him urgently." "Riley, what are you?" Cameron started. "I'm calling their bluff. Because here's what you all seem to have forgotten in your rush to corner me. I'm not some naive small-town girl who's desperate to marry up. I'm a healthcare professional with a spotless reputation, and I know exactly how charitable organizations work." Harrison Webb looked nervous for the first time. "Miss Thompson, I think you're misunderstanding." "Am I?" "Because threatening someone's livelihood to coerce them into signing a legal document sounds like extortion to me, and extortion is a felony." The room went dead silent. Constance's face had gone pale. "Riley, you're being ridiculous. No one threatened—" "Richard," I said, cutting her off. please repeat what you just said about the Ashworth Foundation's donations to Riverside Children's Hospital and how that relates to my employment? I was simply stating facts. You were stating facts immediately after I refused to sign a prenup, in the context of explaining why I should reconsider my decision. That's textbook coercion. My father appeared in the doorway, looking confused and concerned. Riley, Jenna said you needed... He stopped when he saw the torn papers on the floor and the expressions on everyone's faces. What's going on here? Dad, meet the Ashworth family. They just handed me a prenup 30 minutes before my wedding that would make me their property. And when I refused to sign it, Richard here explained how my hospital depends on their charitable donations. Dad's expression shifted from confusion to something much darker. Robert Thompson might be a quiet man, but he'd spent 30 years as a union electrician dealing with bosses who thought they could intimidate working people. Is that so? Dad's voice was dangerously calm. Riley, honey, did you want to sign this prenup? It would strip me of everything I own and give his family control over my career and where I'm allowed to live. Dad nodded slowly, then looked directly at Richard. And you thought threatening my daughter's job would change her mind? Now see here. No, you see here. Dad interrupted, stepping fully into the room. I may not have your money or your fancy title, but I know bullying when I see it. And I know something else. My daughter could buy and sell your son's character with her lunch money. Cameron flinched like he'd been hit. Mr. Thompson, that's not fair. What's not fair is ambushing a woman in her wedding dress with a legal document designed to rob her, then threatening her livelihood when she refuses to be robbed. That's when Jenna reappeared with reinforcements. My mother, my sister Amy, and Amy's husband Derek, who happened to be a criminal defense attorney. Riley, Mom rushed to my side. What's happening? The guests are asking questions and... She stopped when she saw the papers on the floor. What is this mess? The Ashworth family's idea of a wedding gift, a prenup that would make me their indentured servant. Derek immediately crouched down and started examining the torn papers. As a lawyer, he could read between the lines faster than the rest of us. Jesus Christ, he muttered, then looked up at Harrison Webb. You actually advised a client to present this? This wouldn't hold up in family court for 5 minutes. Half these clauses violate basic contract law. His face flushed. I drafted what my clients requested. You drafted an unenforceable document designed to intimidate someone into legal servitude. Then your clients threatened her employment when she refused to be servant. Riley, please tell me someone recorded that conversation. Jenna slowly raised her phone. I may have started recording when things got heated. The color drained from Constance's face. You recorded us? That's illegal. Actually, Derek said with a smile, Pennsylvania is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, it's perfectly legal. Richard was backing toward the door. This is ridiculous. We're simply trying to protect our family's interests. By committing extortion? Because threatening someone's employment to coerce them into signing a legal document is a third-degree felony in Pennsylvania, punishable up to 7 years in prison. We didn't threaten anything, Constance protested. We have it on audio, Jenna said quietly, holding up her phone.
The room erupted. Harrison Webb was frantically packing his briefcase, probably already calculating how to distance himself from his client's criminal behavior. Richard was sputtering about lawsuits and slander. Constance was demanding we delete the recording. And Cameron? Cameron was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Riley, he said finally, this has gotten completely out of hand. Maybe we should all just... Just what? I asked.
Pretend this didn't happen? Pretend your family didn't try to extort me into signing away my rights? Pretend you didn't stand there and let them do it? That hit home. Cameron's shoulders sagged. I didn't know they were going to. You knew about the prenup, I said. Maybe not the details, but you knew. And you said nothing. You let them ambush me in my wedding dress because you were too much of a coward to deal with it beforehand? That's not, he started. When did you know, Cameron? I pressed. When did you know your family was planning this? His silence was answer enough. Oh my God, I breathed. You've known for weeks, haven't you? Maybe months. That's why you've been so nervous, so distant. You knew this was coming and you said nothing. Cameron's face crumpled. Riley, I wanted to tell you, but they said what? That I'd run? That I'd refuse? I shook my head in disgust. So instead of trusting me with the truth, you decided to let them corner me when I'd have no choice but to comply. You let them turn our wedding day into an ambush. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he whispered. No, I agreed. It was supposed to be worse. I was supposed to be so overwhelmed and embarrassed that I'd sign anything just to get it over with. But you all made one crucial mistake. I looked around the room at their faces, angry, embarrassed, desperate. You forgot that I'm not marrying you for your money or your family name, which means I have absolutely nothing to lose by walking away. And with that realization, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I smoothed my grandmother's wedding dress one final time and looked around the room at the chaos the Ashworth family had created. Torn prenup papers scattered across the floor, my family huddled protectively around me, and Cameron's family looking like cornered animals who just realized the trap they'd set had snapped shut on their own legs. Derek, to my brother-in-law, my voice perfectly calm, what would you do if you were in my position right now? Derek glanced at the audio recording on Jenna's phone, then at Harrison Webb, who was practically sweating through his expensive suit. Honestly, I'd make sure everyone involved understood exactly how much trouble they're in, and then I'd make sure the consequences matched the crime. Consequences? Constance's voice cracked. This is all just a misunderstanding. Mrs. Ashworth, your husband just committed extortion on camera. Your family lawyer drafted an unconscionable contract designed to defraud my sister-in-law. And your son participated in a conspiracy to coerce someone into signing a fraudulent legal document. These aren't misunderstandings. These are felonies. That's when I realized something powerful. For the first time since this nightmare began, I held all the cards. They'd overplayed their hands so spectacularly that they'd actually given me everything I needed to destroy them. Here's what's going to happen, I announced, my voice carrying the same authority I used when taking charge during medical emergencies. Everyone is going to sit down and listen very carefully because I'm only going to say this once. Even Richard, for all his bluster, found a chair. First, Cameron, I turned to face my former fiancé directly. I need you to understand that this isn't about the prenup anymore. This is about trust, honesty, and basic human decency. You let your family ambush me because you were too cowardly to have an honest conversation. That's not the foundation of a marriage. That's the foundation of a disaster. He opened his mouth to protest, but I held up my hand. I'm not done. You stood there while your father threatened my career. You watched your mother insult my intelligence. You said nothing while they tried to humiliate me into compliance. That tells me everything I need to know about what our marriage would look like. Tears were streaming down his face now. Riley, please, I love you. No, you don't, I said firmly. You love the idea of me. You love having someone your family considers beneath you so you can feel like the generous one, the different one. But when it mattered, when you had to choose between their approval and my dignity, you chose them. You always choose them. I turned to address his parents. Richard, Constance, you made a critical error of judgment today. You assumed I was desperate to marry into your family. You assumed I'd be so grateful for your son's attention that I'd sign away my rights just to keep him? You were wrong. Richard tried to interrupt. Miss Thompson, I think you should let me finish before you make this worse for yourselves. Because right now, you're looking at criminal charges for extortion. Derek, what's the statute of limitations on extortion in Pennsylvania? 5 years, and given that it was recorded, it's a slam dunk case. Constance had gone completely white. You wouldn't actually try me, I said. You just threatened my livelihood to coerce Miss into signing a fraudulent contract. You did it in front of witnesses, and it's recorded. I have every legal right to pursue charges, and honestly, I'm leaning toward it.
That's when Harrison Webb finally found his voice. Miss Thompson, perhaps we could discuss this more privately? Mr. Webb, I turned to face the lawyer, you should probably stop talking and start thinking about your own liability here. You drafted a document that no ethical attorney would put their name on, and you presented it as part of what amounts to a criminal conspiracy. I'd be more worried about your bar license than my privacy preferences right now. The room fell silent except for the sound of guests outside, still waiting for a wedding that was never going to happen. But I wasn't done, because while they'd been trying to humiliate me, I'd been thinking about exactly how to turn their weapons against them. Here's what's really going to happen, I continued. In about 10 minutes, I'm going to walk out there to face 200 guests who are expecting a wedding, and I'm going to tell them exactly why there isn't going to be one. Cameron pleaded, please don't. Don't what? Don't tell the truth? Don't explain why your family's idea of welcoming me was to try to steal everything I own? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Cameron, your guest list includes half the social elite of Millbrook County. Your mother's garden club friends, your father's business partners, 3 city council members, and the president of Riverside Hospital's board of directors. Constance's face went from white to green. You wouldn't dare. Watch me, because here's what's really going to happen. I continued. In about 10 minutes, I'm going to walk out there to face 200 guests who are expecting a wedding, and I'm going to tell them exactly why there isn't going to be one. Cameron pleaded, please don't. Don't what? Don't tell the truth? Don't explain why your family's idea of welcoming me was to try to steal everything I own? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Cameron, your guest list includes half the social elite of Millbrook County. Your mother's garden club friends, your father's business partners, 3 city council members, and the president of Riverside Hospital's board of directors. Constance's face went from white to green. You wouldn't dare. Watch me, because here's what you all failed to consider. I'm not the one who should be embarrassed about what happened here today. You are. I walked to the window and looked out at the guests, mingling in the garden, champagne glasses in hand, completely unaware of the drama unfolding above them. Let's see, I mused aloud. There's Mrs. Weatherby from the country club. She'll be fascinated to hear about the prenup terms. And Judge Morrison. I wonder what he'll think about the extortion charges. Oh, and Dr. Patterson from the hospital board. I'm sure he'll be very interested in how the Ashworth Foundation uses charitable donations as leverage for personal vendettas. Stop. Richard said hoarsely. Just stop. Why? Isn't this what you wanted? A public ceremony? A formal announcement? The only thing that's changed is the content of my speech. That's when the real panic set in. I could see it in their faces as they realized what I was actually threatening. It wasn't just about refusing the prenup anymore. It was about destroying their reputation in front of everyone who mattered in their social circle. Constance found her voice first. What would it take for you to handle this privately? Handle what privately? I asked innocently. Your son's decision to betray me? Your husband's criminal behavior? Your family's attempt to rob me? Which part exactly are you hoping to keep quiet? All of it, she whispered. I pretended to consider this, watching them squirm. Then I smiled, not a nice smile, but the smile of someone who just realized exactly how much power they held. You know what? You're right. This should be handled privately. Just between us. I paused, letting the hope build in their eyes. Unfortunately, there's just one problem with that plan. What? Cameron asked desperately. I don't trust any of you as far as I can throw you, I said simply. You've already proven you'll lie, manipulate, and commit crimes to get what you want, so why would I believe any promise you make now? Derek stepped forward. Riley,
what if they put their commitments in writing, legal documents with real consequences? I looked at my brother-in-law, then back at the Ashworth family. What kind of consequences? Well, Derek said thoughtfully, extortion carries a maximum fine of $15,000 in Pennsylvania, plus court costs, legal fees, and the possibility of jail time. If they were willing to pay equivalent damages voluntarily— You want money? Richard asked, looking almost relieved. I want justice, I corrected. But if you're willing to pay the same price voluntarily that you'd pay if convicted, plus cover my costs for this nightmare you've created, then yes, we might have something to discuss. Hope flickered in Cameron's eyes. Riley, if we can work this out— Cameron, I said gently, there is no we anymore. There never was. Today proved that. And with those words, I walked toward the door, leaving them to contemplate exactly how much their reputation was worth to them. Because in about 5 minutes, I was going to find out. I walked out of that bridal suite and down the grand staircase of Evergreen Manor, with my head held high, my family flanking me like a protective guard. The murmur of 200 guests enjoying cocktails in the garden grew louder as we approached the French doors leading to the ceremony space. Jenna squeezed my arm. Are you sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, I replied. The garden was spectacular. White roses and peonies adorned every surface, string lights twinkled overhead, and the late afternoon sun cast everything in a golden glow. Our guests were scattered across the manicured lawn, champagne glasses in hand, completely unaware that they were about to witness something far more dramatic than a wedding ceremony. I could see some of Millbrook County's most prominent residents, Judge Morrison chatting with the bank president, Mrs. Weatherby from the country club holding court near the Rose Garden, Dr. Patterson from the hospital board laughing with several city council members. Cameron's groomsmen were gathered near the bar, checking their watches and wondering where the groom had disappeared to.
I walked straight to the microphone that had been set up for our vows. The moment I appeared, the crowd began to quiet and move toward their seats. Someone started the processional music, but I gestured to the quartet to stop playing. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the garden, thank you all for being here today to celebrate what was supposed to be Cameron and my wedding. A few people laughed, thinking I was being charmingly informal. They had no idea what was coming. Unfortunately, there's not going to be a wedding today, and I think you all deserve to know why. The laughter died. You could have heard a pin drop. 30 minutes ago, Cameron's family presented me with a prenuptial agreement. Now, I know some of you might be thinking that's normal, that wealthy families protect their assets, but this wasn't a prenup. It was a blueprint for legal theft. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Weatherby's champagne glass slipped from her fingers. The document demanded that I sign away my business, my savings, my professional income, and even my right to live in Millbrook County if the marriage failed. In exchange, the Ashworth family assets would remain completely protected. Essentially, I would become their property. Judge Morrison was frowning deeply, his legal mind clearly processing the implications. When I refused to sign this unconscionable document, Richard Ashworth explained to me how my hospital depends on charitable donations from the Ashworth Foundation. The message was clear: sign the prenup or watch my career be destroyed. Dr. Patterson's face had gone completely white. As president of the hospital board, he knew exactly what Richard's threat implied. Now, I want to be very clear about something, I continued, my voice growing stronger. I didn't refuse this prenup because I wanted the Ashworth money. I refused it because I have self-respect, because I know the difference between protection and exploitation, and because I refuse to be bullied into legal servitude by people who think their bank account gives them the right to own other human beings. The crowd was completely silent now. Some guests were pulling out their phones, undoubtedly to record what was turning into the most dramatic non-wedding in Millbrook County history. Cameron knew about this prenup. He's known for weeks, possibly months. He chose not to tell me because he was afraid I'd refuse to marry him if I knew what his family really thought of me. Instead, he let them ambush me in my wedding dress, hoping I'd be too embarrassed to say no in front of all of you. I could see Cameron and his family hovering in the manor's doorway, too cowardly to come outside, but too horrified to look away. So let me tell you what I've learned today about the Ashworth family values. They believe marriage is a business transaction where the woman brings assets to be absorbed while the man's family wealth remains untouchable. They believe threatening someone's livelihood is an acceptable negotiation tactic, and they believe that money gives them the right to humiliate and manipulate anyone they consider beneath their social status. Mrs. Weatherby was frantically whispering to her companions. Judge Morrison was taking notes on his phone. Dr. Patterson looked like he was already planning damage control for the hospital's relationship with the foundation. But here's what they failed to understand, I said, my voice filled with quiet strength. I didn't need to marry Cameron Ashworth. I wanted to marry the man I thought he was, someone kind, honest, and brave enough to stand up for what's right. Today, I learned that man doesn't exist. I paused, looking out at the faces of people who'd known me for years, who'd watched me care for their children at the hospital, who understood exactly who I was and what I stood for. I want to thank you all for coming today to witness what turned out to be something much more important than a wedding. You witnessed the moment I chose my dignity over their money, my principles over their pressure, and my future over their threats. The applause started slowly, just a few people clapping. Then more joined in. Within moments, the entire garden erupted in applause that lasted nearly a full minute. When it finally died down, I had one more thing to say. There will be an open bar until 8 o'clock. Dinner will be served as planned, and the Riverside band will play for dancing. Just because the Ashworths wasted your time doesn't mean you can't enjoy the evening. Consider it a celebration of freedom, integrity, and the power of saying no to people who try to buy your soul. With that, I stepped away from the microphone and walked directly to my parents. "I'm proud of you, kiddo," Dad said, wrapping me in a bear hug that nearly lifted me off the ground. "That took real courage," Mom added, tears streaming down her face. The next hour was surreal. Guest after guest approached me to express their support. Judge Morrison quietly mentioned that if I ever wanted to pursue the extortion charges, he'd be happy to recommend a prosecutor. Dr. Patterson assured me that my position at the hospital was secure and that the board would be reviewing the hospital's relationship with any donors who used charitable giving as leverage for personal vendettas. Mrs. Weatherby, the queen bee of Millbrook County society, delivered the killing blow to the Ashworth reputation. "My dear, what they did to you was absolutely barbaric. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people they really are." By 6 o'clock, the Ashworth family had slunk away from Evergreen Manor like the cowards they were. Cameron had tried to approach me once, but Derek and my father had formed a human wall that sent a clear message: stay away. The settlement negotiations happened the following week. Derek handled everything. The Ashworth family, facing social exile and potential criminal charges, agreed to pay $75,000 in damages, enough to cover my wedding expenses, legal fees, and what Derek called emotional distress compensation. They also signed a legally binding agreement never to contact me again and to cease any foundation activities that could impact my career. Most importantly, they agreed to a public statement acknowledging that the prenup had been unreasonable and inappropriate, and that I had acted with complete integrity in refusing to sign it. 3 months later, I received a letter from Harrison Webb's law firm informing me that Cameron and a woman named Priscilla Montgomery had eloped to Las Vegas. Apparently, Priscilla came from old money and was more suitable for the Ashworth family expectations. I felt nothing but relief for both of them. My therapy practice has grown by 40% since the wedding that wasn't. Turns out standing up to bullies in public is excellent advertising for someone who helps families navigate difficult situations. I've had parents tell me they chose me specifically because they heard about how I handled the Ashworth family.
I'm dating now, a pediatric surgeon named Marcus who makes me laugh and treats me like an equal partner in all things. When he mentions marriage someday, he talks about building something together, not absorbing me into his life. The real victory wasn't the money, though that helped. It wasn't even the vindication, though that was satisfying. The real victory was discovering exactly how strong I am when I choose myself over other people's expectations. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is having people show you exactly who they really are before you make the biggest mistake of your life. The Ashworth family did me the ultimate favor. They freed me from a future that would have slowly destroyed everything I'd worked to build. And that realization, standing in my grandmother's wedding dress in front of 200 people, was worth more than all their money could ever buy. I dodged a bullet that day, but more than that, I discovered that I'm the kind of woman who can catch bullets and throw them back.